The next necessary step in the sequence is right in front of me, hiding in the white space, on the page, the empty glass of my workboard. Solving a problem is simple, an intuitive leap or a brute thrust of concentration, and the puzzle simply unravels. I've always favored Gordian solutions, in this and all else, even where they're not appropriate. As I stare at the board and the lines unwritten, though, the next necessary step in the sequence is right in front of me, hiding in the white space on the page or the empty glass of my workboard. Solving a problem is simple, an intuitive leap or a brute thrust of concentration, and the puzzle unravels. I've always favored Gordian solutions, in this and all else, even where they're not entirely appropriate. As I stare at the board and the lines unwritten, though, I think not so much of knots to be cut as trails to be blazed. We rent a house in a stretch of wood in the middle of suburban sprawl. Green is a wild color here. The ivy, thorns, and roots have swallowed at least one foundation laid in the name of development. They would swallow more if people were still trying to impose square and line where twists and bind hold sway. The wood is full of oddities. The chimney from an old cabin, stone moorings that once held a mill wheel, the plain of river rock where the snakes catch fish and sun themselves. The winding paths between those sites disappear in a single season left untended. My hands have some practice with machete and axe, and I keep my palms rough as I keep the trails clear. I think of Emerson and Thoreau as I go between my house on the hill and the green worlds below. For Henry's aunts in labored living, he had Sunday steak and haircuts, each by the grace of another man's wealth. Did a trim keep him honest? That 6 days of wild would end with a short walk and a single word. Did he ever slip into believing himself somehow linked to this land, already bound up in ownership, inheritance tax, and perhaps, most importantly, a name? I like to think my world more civil and savage than Walden. The gardens lovely and venomous, the surrounding city vital and hungry. But the conceit of every era is that it is more than what came before. More everything except simple. And my own era is no exception. I see the copperhead amidst the morning glories, each safe as the sunshine they're drinking if I leave them undisturbed, and I know that as they were here long before I was the one cutting the paths, they will be here long after. I stare through the blankness of my board, still, and wonder at the folly of trailblazing. I don't need to be so methodical. I've got a good idea of where this is headed, a clear picture of how I got there, and the conclusions are already well integrated into decision processes. I walk the woods barefoot, moving clean through underbrush and bramble, on or off the trails that once were. My steps are swift, silent, trackless. I know the wood, but more, I know woods. I need no trail, and need leave no trail, so I slow myself with the weight and swing of a machete. Do I cut my way through so that others, less sure-footed, can see the wonders the wood holds? I could believe this if I thought the lamp-post, a relic from a 19th century development effort as doomed as all that would follow, was fundamentally more interesting than the green that engulfs it. But those landmarks of failed pacification aren't the high points on my walks. And there are no paths to the high points of my walks. My satisfaction is in the movement between points, and while that pleasure is partly an expression of pride, the greater portion is simple joy in kinesis, and the process of responding to an environment or a series of problems on their own terms, rather than imposing my own for the sake of simplicity. And here is the real folly of trailblazing. the path I leave cannot be the one that I took, even the one that I took in creating it. I'm replacing Heisenberg's billiard cue with a sledgehammer, often literally. The undergrowth, brambles, vines, and fallen timbers that I move over, under, and around on my walks are removed in the wake of my work. The labor involved in their removal will not be a part of the path I leave behind, and only the most arbitrary of utilitarian interpretations can distinguish between the log across the path and the one to the side. Only this most arbitrary can provide a clear environmental justification for these alterations. It comes back around to granting access to those who would not have it otherwise, but access to what? A blunted approximation of experiences that I value, stripped of the processes by which they came about? Perhaps, but on reflection there's another layer of expression here. In clearing paths that are something like sidewalks, arranging a fallen tree so it is something like the bench at a bus stop, I am adding an element of familiarity to what is, for some, unapproachably strange. I am creating or imposing something similar enough to the commonplace to be recognized, yet dissimilar enough to be recognized as distinct. I am, perhaps, creating a context where one may correlate their experiences that some things are valuable with their experience of the unfamiliar. This is the essence of effective conservation, but also of effective conversation.